click yourselves off right away after this conference is done. So anyway, just that reminder. So now we begin our second segment with presentations from Gunnison and Colorado Springs. So again, please introduce yourself and your position in your branch. And we begin with Gunnison.
Hello, this has been a very inspiring session, and as the smallest branch in the state, it gives us some goals, and we have to work a little bit differently. So I'm going to share with you our project, Art in the Park. Our branch was started in 1927 and has over the years looked at various community aspects of what the community needs and what AAUW can do to fulfill those. And in 1974, we were looking at the community, and there was not a place for young artists or beginning artists to show their artwork. So we decided to make an art show. We had some people who had come from branches who had done that. We had a couple of artists in our branch who were wanting to show their product. And so we decided to do an art show. The logical place, because it didn't cost us anything, was a lovely park on the east edge of town that fronts Highway 50, Legion Park. It had plenty of little trees and grass, and we thought it would be a good gathering place for artists and the community to intermingle. So we started. And the first year, we just set out invitations to artists. We advertised. We handed out drop cloths because people didn't have tents at that time. And it has evolved a great deal since then. The first place is to find the place. And we said we've been able to luckily use the Legion Park all these 47 years. It has evolved also. We have now a pavilion. And so when we reserve the park, we get the use of the pavilion, which provides us with electricity. There is water available. The Parks and Recreation give us the paint to mark the sites, provide trash cans, trash pickup. They'll do barriers if we need them. So that is our venue, our place to have it. When we do that and reserve it in January, we also have to provide insurance. And we have used the insurance through AAUW, and we add them as the city requires us to add them as a rider for that event only. There's no additional cost involved in the insurance other than what we get for our regular yearly insurance. Then you need vendors. And we have gotten vendors for a variety of ways. We put articles in surrounding newspapers saying that we are looking for vendors. We're going to be doing a show. We have been listed on a couple of sites, vendor sites. Members, when they go to shows, pick up cards or talk to artists about it. Our best vendor recruiter are vendors who like our show and have come back years and years. And there's a problem with that because also sometimes they retire or move on. Well, they retire and quit producing, so you have to come up with new vendors. We send out to the vendors an invitation in January generally. That is a 3 plays. There's an introduction page, there's an information page, and then there's a page to send back for us with their application. We do jury this show, so it has to be original artwork. One time it had to be, you had to be a vendor from Colorado, but now you don't. And so once we've gotten those in, we combine them all and put into a site. Our biggest expense is advertising the show. Our Gunnison Country Times newspaper puts out a Gunnison magazine that we have continued to have an ad in, which is a statewide distribution. We have done a couple of ads then at the time in our local shopper. We have on occasion been on the radio local radio station to promote the show. The other advertising that we do is a poster that has a logo that was designed by our artist who was in our first show, and they came up with an advertising logo that we have used all 46 years since we didn't use it the first year. And so we have posters, we distribute them. We have routes that each branch member takes a route and puts up posters. We give them to the branch members in May. We don't actually put the posters up until after July 4th because there are so many things being promoted that if we want a space on a business window, we need to take down the 4th of July posters and put ours up. We go from Cimarron up to Taylor Park. And some places have let us put them up, some places they want to put up. But the big advertisements is one of the biggest expenses. The mailing that we send out does cost us, and this year we did try email to half of them that we've managed to acquire email addresses. We have a member who can do that. So that is how we get the word out about the show. The show has continued to use the original art. When we first started, our artist friends said that if you have a lot of food vendors, you get a different kind of clientele coming to purchase the park, items in the park. And so if you want your vendors to sell their artwork, you need to limit the amount of food that you have. So we originally had a lemonade stand that we had a secret recipe that we cooked up, and we made lots and lots of lemonade, and we found out it was very difficult and time consuming, and we decided to rent that space out to another organization who might want to do that. The most exciting one was when we partnered with the literacy program, but they would cook for a whole week and had pulled pork and had fasoni soup, and they ran out of volunteers for that. Currently, the League of Women Voters has used that. We rent the space to them. And this year, since we didn't know we were going to be able to do the show at all until the middle of June, they did not feel comfortable doing a tent and working with that, with the COVID restrictions. So but we have also always had a coffee, tea, and water concession that we run ourselves because we offer coffee to the vendors when they first come in. The big amount of time for the membership is, in addition to putting up the posters, is the setup of the park. And we start that the day before. Well, we start actually once we know how many vendors we are going to have. We have to go out to the park and look it around, because the joke of the community is that the trees change and move around. And you know, a first branch member who hears that we have to go see if the trees have moved around thinks we're out of our minds. But sometimes trees fall down, sometimes they plant different size trees. And if a tree is little, you can put a tent against it. If it gets to be a certain size, you can't put a tent against it. When it gets tall, you can get a tent under it. So prior to doing the map and setting up the park on the map, we go out to physically look at it. And then we move around the vendors so that we don't have jewelers next to jewelers. We try and scatter out the different kinds of artists, so we have a variety all over the park. The day before, we meet at the park. We have a select group that do that because we don't want too many people. We use the map that was created, and then we start marking the park and painting the signs on. Usually we're rather free form in that we have lots of space. So we just say within this space, even though it only says a 10 by 10 site, you really actually get a lot more. The trees used to be 1, 2, or 3 spaces apart. Now they've changed as they've aged, as all of us have. This year, we were very specific and gave each person just their 10 by 10 to put their tent because we wanted to be adequately spaced for the social distancing. The day of the show starts at crack of dawn. We all are there by 6 o'clock. We have people who are assigned to check in vendors, show them where their site is. If they didn't send up, when we mark the park, we are finished by 6 o'clock and people can start checking in. And some people put their tents up the night before on Saturday night. We don't recommend they put product out because we don't have any security. We do tell the police that we are having the show and they do drive around, but there's not a security guard on site. So the day of the show, we arrive at 6. At 7, the coffee crew arrives and sets up that. At 8, our members who are going to do the AUW booth arrive. We have literature available. We have chairs so people who can get tired and want to sit and talk to us. We do have an opportunity then to share with the community AUW's purpose, what our function is. It's a very rewarding time, and we got a donation just not this year, but not last year, since we didn't meet, but the year before, from a young lady who came through and said, "Oh, I got an AUW scholarship when I was in college," and she gave us a donation, which was very delightful. At 9 o'clock, the treasurer comes around and visits with all the vendors, asks them to move their vehicles to the off-street parking so we have places for customers to come. And she gives them an envelope with the information about the sales tax. We have our own sales tax license, and we do offer to pay theirs if they want to do that. And most vendors, almost all of the vendors do, because they don't have a city sales tax license. So we actually, it gives us a chance to see what they are making and how they are doing and how the show is doing. We schedule everybody because we're a very small branch, and so it took all 20 of our members to put it on. Everybody has a job, and we schedule so we have plenty of time to go around and shop ourselves. At the end of the day, we add up how much we've made. We charge at this time $80 for a booth. We did make a special price for a couple of places we have a face painter that we thought could not apply this year, and so we charged her less. The league, because they were not doing their food, they wanted a booth, and so we did charge them a little less since they weren't making money at that outfit. Since we have $80, it's however many vendors we have, and the highest we've ever had was when we had our 25th anniversary and we had 70. We would like to have 42. 32 has been usual, but this year we had 18. So in order to do our 4 scholarships for non-traditional students at Western, and to do anything for the funds for AAW funds, we're going to have to do a little bit more, because last year we had to dip into our CD to do our 4 scholarships. I think that it has given us as a branch a camaraderie, a vision in the community, a place in the community. We have used it for recruiting. While our membership has stayed pretty steady in number right now, we lost one, we gained one, and we certainly are inspired by Durango's increase in their membership. So we're looking forward. We're doing an evaluation this September to see how we think we want to proceed. It is a lot of work, but all fundraisers are. And if we can build it back up to 32, because we didn't start until June, some vendors said that they didn't really know, because some of our vendors are professional vendors, you would say. They do a lot of shows. Others are local and they do not do but 1 or 2 shows. And I was thinking about economic development for women. And I was realizing that most of our vendors are women. We have some men, but most of the vendors are women who are using their skills to further their retirement or work from home while they have their children. And I think it's a wonderful opportunity for both us and for the community. And so at this time, it is my pleasure to turn this over to Cindy Zinkert Strange from Colorado Springs, who will share with you their groups, special groups. And there's a chocolate lovers group that I've always wanted to go over and participate in, but I don't know when they meet, and I haven't managed to drive all the way to Colorado Springs to have chocolate, but it sounds like a good idea. Cindy, take it away.
Thanks, Sharon. I happen to chair a visual arts interest group for Colorado Springs, so your presentation and project was especially interesting to me. Greetings from Colorado Springs. I'm Cindy Zinkert Strange, and I am president-elect of the Colorado Springs branch. Just a quick shout out to our president, Pip Bodkin, who you would have been hearing from, except for the fact that she just has spent the last 11 days in Iceland and just came home last night. So I agreed to present in her stead. And as Sharon mentioned, I'm going to be talking about interest groups. And I'll share my screen here. So I don't know if Drew is still on the on the Zoom, but if you were looking for some nuts and bolts, and here's some. I don't know why I came up with this analogy, but AAUW interest groups, an engine for membership growth and retention. Interest groups are certainly a ubiquitous part of AAUW. But I think in Colorado Springs, we have really deployed them strategically to help us increase our membership and to help us in our mission-focused activities at the branch level. So first of all, interest groups as ignition. We all love our mission to advance gender equity through research, education, and advocacy. But none of us are monolithic. We all have other interests. And through interest groups, AAUW can spark connections to very specific interests and hobbies. I know myself, when I became a member of AAUW, I was first attracted by a Southwest studies group that was meeting in Colorado Springs. I was new to the region. And so, you know, the ability to learn something about the Southwest really clicked with me and prompted me to take immediate action. I've also always been interested in improving, advancing gender equity, but it sometimes is the more general mission that you can kind of say, well, I'll get around to that tomorrow. The immediate thing kind of sparked my interest, and I think we've seen that with other new members. It offers a low-key way to explore new interests. You know, something that I think I might be interested in, but not sure. Colorado Springs has 26 interest groups. We're a pretty large branch in Colorado. And of course, most branches wouldn't have this many, but we have 5 book clubs, 2 hiking groups, 2 writing groups, 2 history groups, 2 current affair groups, 4 arts and entertainment groups. And of course, as Sharon has already mentioned, 2 dining groups, which includes our chocolate lovers. And sometimes they just serve as the spark to attract initial interest. Interest groups also serve as lubricants. What do I mean by that? Well, with an interest group, that's a smaller group of people meeting, and it eases the socialization for new members. It's easier to get to know people in a much smaller group. It encourages increased participation at the branch level through those social ties. Even though our branch is very mission focused, we don't live by mission alone. And those social ties, I think, encourage people to become more involved at the branch level. Our interest groups offer a simplified structure that's easy to commit to, maybe easier than committing to becoming very involved at the branch level. And a lot of times, and what we hope it will be, is a stepping stone to involvement at the branch level. It also enables the branch to stay connected to members' lives. We saw this especially during COVID-19, but it happens, I think, throughout the year. When you have a membership of 170 or 250, it's hard to know what's going on with everyone. But through our more socially oriented interest groups, we are able to track important milestones, concerns, that kind of thing. And again, the smaller groups have at times provided a more comfortable environment during COVID times. Right now, we are going to begin to meet in person. We've got some policies in place as to how we'll do that. There may be some of our membership who won't feel comfortable coming together as a large group, but might still be able to participate in a smaller interest group and have a comfort level about that. And of course, like so many of the other branches have mentioned, Zoom was a lifesaver as we continue to meet at both the branch and interest group level. Interest groups can also serve as a fuel additive. And what do I mean by that? Well, we had the question come up about communicating with our members. What's the best way? We have a newsletter, we have a website, we have a Facebook page, we do e-blasts. All of those are important in communicating with members. But we have found that interest groups provide a really important channel as well. As smaller groups are gathered, we communicate at the board level and with our and through our interest group coordinator with interest group chairs about important events and policies that we want to share. That way, if someone didn't read their newsletter, they're going to get the information another way. And we also can use it as a way to solicit thoughts and ideas about key issues from our members. There's always a survey, but we sometimes get better results and better communicated by approaching it through our interest group chairs. And our interest groups have also served as a handy way to structure some of our fundraising and other branch activities. Sometimes we have some friendly competition even between interest groups, and that's worked well. We do a annual auction as a fundraiser for our scholarships, and typically interest groups participate within the interest group in creating some kind of basket or contribution that can be auctioned off through the silent auction. And those baskets usually reflect the particular interests of that interest group. And finally, I like to think of interest groups as a turbocharger. They connect with brand new audiences and potential partners. AAUW definitely has a brand in our community, but all of those individual interest groups touch new audiences and potential partners, and those are brought back to the branch as a whole. Our interest groups may be aligned with, may be complementary to, or intersectional with our mission. So we're finding lots of ways, even within our individual interest groups, hook back to the mission. And then they can be added strategically to grow membership. And I wanted to give you two specific examples from our Colorado Springs branch of how we've done that. Several years ago, we had an organization of museum docents at the Fine Arts Center. That was a 50-year organization, wonderful group of women. But when the museum was essentially purchased by Colorado College in Colorado Springs, it was decided, or they decided, to disband the docent program. And several of us who were docents and were also already members of AAUW thought, you know, there's a lot of interest within the branch in visual arts, a lot of people who just have that as a hobby. And I wonder if we created an interest group around visual arts, if that would attract many of these docents who were otherwise eligible for AAUW. And in fact, that's what we did. We ended up with quite a sizable interest group, which attracted about half of its membership were longtime members of our branch. And another half were some of these women from the docent program who had enjoyed their social contacts and enjoyed talking about art, and who, believe me, many of them are very, very passionate about our AAUW mission to advance gender equity. And so that was a marriage that worked really well. And a lot of these women who joined the interest group have become very active at the branch level, filled board positions, and it's been a great partnership. And then another new interest group that we added just within the last year, even during COVID, is an environmental action group. Again, we had a lot of board members who, in addition to their interest in improving gender equity, were interested in the environment. I think most of us are interested in the environment. And they put together an environmental action group. And of course, that can be very intersectional with our mission because, you know, oftentimes in areas where there may be exposure to toxins or whatever, it may be people living in poverty, often women who can't afford to move away or can't afford to improve the situation. So it's an environmental action group that is not directly aligned with our mission, but is definitely intersectional with our mission. And again, has contacted us with, or put us in contact with, given us a presence with a lot of other groups who might otherwise not have known AAUW. I'm looking forward to whatever questions you have. I had to put this in because as I put these 5 slides together, I thought, this isn't me. Why am I got all these engines and things up? So I wanted to end with a piece of artwork, this Monet painting of a train station in Paris. Thanks. I'll invite Carolyn to come back on the call, or maybe
and also Sharon.
Sharon, yeah.
If she'll come, and would you would you go ahead and end your, there you go.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Where's Sharon? Sharon, if you would turn your video on and your audio on. Well, while we're waiting on her to turn her system on, maybe we'll start with some questions with you, Cindy. What would you say has been an effective thing that you've done to expand your membership to younger, more diverse women? You talked about these 2 interest groups that you kind of strategically targeted, but what about the younger members and a wider diversity in members?
Well, one of the things we've done, I'm so glad you asked me this because I should have included this in our in the PowerPoint. But several years ago, we started an evening connections, an interest group. And that meets in the evening, as it says, whereas most of our interest groups, although times vary, we meet during the day, and our branch meets on Saturdays. The Evening Connections group brings in speakers actually on a variety of topics, many of them intersectional with our mission, some just complementary to. But the fact that it meets in the evening and it meets with a little cocktail hour followed with a speaker, that has brought in a number of younger members. We also this year have a board member who is a retired professor at one of the college systems in Colorado Springs. And she is going to be focusing as part of our community outreach much more extensively at the college and university level to try and re-energize the student branches that we support and perhaps bring some of them into our branch as they graduate and move on. We're also working with our scholarship winners to try and do the same thing.
Okay. Now you have a lot of groups. Is there a lot of turnover and changeover in those groups, or do they remain pretty stable? I mean, how do you get new leaders? You have trouble keeping new leaders in them and members, and how does that work?
We actually do have an interest group right now where we have people interested in it, but the previous leader has retired and no one has stepped up yet. So yes, that occasionally happens. I would say our list remains pretty stable. Our groups do vary in size. We have some interest groups which are just 4 or 5 people. Some of our reading groups are small. We have groups which have 40 to 50 people in them. Again, I think though the smaller group really helps to cement social ties, which again, we hope to capitalize on for accomplishing our broader mission. I don't know, did that answer your question, Carolyn?
I think so. So how do most groups get started? I know you talked about the 2 that you strategically set up, but what about the others? And how do they vary with other groups in the mix?
I think, well, sometimes I think I mentioned there were 5 book groups. Those
Right.
book groups tend to meet in homes.
Mm-hmm.
So there is an outside limit as to how many people can practically join an individual book group. So sometimes, maybe there's a 6th book group in our lives somewhere in the future, as some of those groups become less practical to manage. Someone else may choose. Like the visual arts, we had an Arts to Go group and still have an Arts to Go group, which actually makes visits to theaters or to art galleries or whatever. And visual arts kind of actually grew out of that idea. But we invite our members as they have a thought about another interest group that might draw some traction, to pass that information on to our interest group coordinator, who brings it to the board for discussion. Is this a fit with our mission? Again, it doesn't, in the case of interest groups, it may not directly support the mission, but we want it to be complementary to it, certainly. And we put the information out to our membership and we go from there. We do have a STEM interest group, which is a little bit dormant. Just some things that happened in the life of that interest group, and we're looking to re-energize that. And then I also heard on the intercouncil call yesterday that at least one branch and maybe more have started an interest group on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I think that's a terrific idea. And I plan to take that back to our diversity, equity, and inclusion committees and see if there would be an interest in starting that interest group.
Okay, let's go to Sharon for a minute because I still have some more questions that have shown up in Q&A. So Sharon, Art in the Park sounds like a lot of work. And I'm assuming you guys think it's worth that effort. Have you ever thought of other ways of raising money, or is that kind of the passion of the group?
Well, that is the one that we use for our scholarships. At Christmas time, we have had open houses. We would recruit 4 houses and offer tours for Christmas tours. And so we quit doing that, but we have a member who has opened her home, and we have a list, and we send out invitations to people we think might be interested, because AAUW started the library and we continue to support it. And so we have done that as a fundraiser for the summer reading program at the library. Mm-hmm. So that has been the 2 kinds of fundraisers we've done. As far as other fundraisers, no, we have not, but we're going to have to continue. And I liked the one I just heard something about, that you gave up lunch, because we are going to be a little short this year for funding our 4 scholarships at the University for non-traditional students. So I'm open to suggestions. We will have to evaluate, because as we say, we are a small branch, and it does take all of us working to do that. So, we'll see what the future holds. We have 47 years is a long time to be doing something like this. Mm-hmm. And there are getting to be lots more art shows and lots more farmers market that have an opportunity for people to display their work. And so we would invite Cindy's visual arts group to come over and join us on a Sunday drive from Colorado Springs. I don't know if that answered your question, Caroline, but
well, I think 20 people is a small number, and to it takes Art in the Park on like that, that's pretty impressive.
Well, everybody has to participate, and so everybody does. Our oldest member is a avid member because she received her master's degree scholarship. She was an AAUW fellow, and she's an inspiration. And so at 91, she came and sat with the coffee for 4 hours and loved it and sold coffee. It has served the purpose of an interest group. We still do have a book reading interest group and a hiking interest group, but it has means that everybody has to participate. Mm. And everybody does. And the person who currently sends out the hard copies, she and her husband, she rooks her husband into helping her stamp and prepare those mailings. So it is a lot of work for all of us. I mean, well, if you divide it up, everybody has some kind of job to do.
And it sounds like it's a good way of keeping the group in communications. where it may not be an interest group like Colorado Springs, but you must spend a lot of time during the year planning for this.
We have it down, so we know the jobs that need to be done. And then sometimes we create new jobs. We had sold t-shirts for a long time, and then we decided we had all this inventory, and then somebody had to keep the inventory. And so we sold out our inventory, but for our 45th, we decided we should have t-shirts again, and we came up with a different way of selling them and decided to to do that again. So somebody new has to come up with an idea and way of handling that, and we try to streamline things so that we're going to have to evaluate, because this year we got, instead of just being going to the park, it took 3 or 4 times, and our insurance, we've had no problem getting that before, but all of a sudden the city decided they had to have specific wording, and they didn't tell us immediately. So we're hoping that maybe without all the inconvenience of COVID, it'll go smoother next year, but we try and evaluate and smooth the wrinkles out so we don't have as much difficulty getting things done.
Okay, well, let's go back. I still have a few more questions here. Let's try to go through them pretty quickly, Cindy. One of them is, I love the idea of creating interest groups that might connect us to other organizations. Hang on just a minute. Both for abundance and strength of impact, but also to help others be aware of AAUW. It also helps. So that's more of a comment.
Yes, and I couldn't agree more.
Right. Mary Korch says, I absolutely love the concept of using interest groups to disseminate information and fundraising challenges. Are the interest group chairs somehow directly connected to members of the board or particularly invested in mission goals? This is as opposed to very independently operating interest groups.
I'd have to acknowledge there that our interest group chairs are, many of them are very connected and invested in AAUW. We probably have some who are less so, but the way we handle that is we do have an interest group coordinator, and that person is an assistant to the board and meets with the board on a regular basis and communicates with interest group chairs regularly, kind of spelling out what we need communicated and discussed. And it likewise provides them a conduit for sharing back up the chain particular concerns of an individual interest group. So I think that works pretty well, not always perfectly, but.
Okay, and there is one more question here. It may be a little related. We've got just about another minute. AAUW being a focus point for individual member interests. Can you give more information about how you have created this collaboration?
Would you mind repeating that one more time?
It's a little confusing. AAUW being a focus point for individual member interest. Can you give more information about how you have created this collaboration? I guess to encourage other individual member interest in forming interest groups.
Well, I'm sure that's a really good question. I'm not sure I understand it exactly. I don't know if anyone wants to, if anyone can unmute themselves to explain a little bit better.
Well, Gina, if you have anything you want to add to your question, you're welcome to do that. But I think at this point, we're getting close to being out of time. So why don't we just move on for our 5-minute break?
Okay, I'm
And-
sorry, Gina.
That's-
I'm sure there's a good question there, but I'm
Well, and
just-
Gina, if you put it in the right